everyone, and welcome back to Zilog and Moto, your weekly look at the 8 and 16-bit world of Sega. If you're not familiar with Zilog and Moto, or this is your first time here, welcome. I'm glad you stopped by and gave me some of your valuable time as I performed this deep dive into this vast library of almost 1,300 titles across the Master System, Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X. Each and every week I pick a different game from this library to spotlight, and to be blunt, see if it's worth a damn or not. Or, in the case of the last 3 weeks, half a damn, as I seem to be stuck in a rut of 2-star games. And just to be clear, since I don't think I've mentioned this in a while, and that's probably a mistake, the Zilog and Moto review scale goes from bomb, effectively 0 stars, all the way up to the mythical 5-star rating. I promise you there are some 5-star games in this library, I just haven't gotten to them yet. Anyway, if that kind of content delivered to you weekly is something you'd be interested in, I heartily recommend you subscribe, and every Monday or Tuesday morning, or Wednesday in this case, you'll see what kind of trouble I've gotten into this time. As far as this week's video goes, it's a new day for Zilog and Moto, as for the first time I'll be looking at a sequel to a game that I've already reviewed for the channel. It is not, however, the first time I'm looking at an additional title in a series, as that bit of notoriety goes to the EA Hockey, the European version of NHL Hockey, that I covered back in episodes 20 and 16 respectively. Normally I wait about 100 episodes between games in a series to give the channel some time to breathe, but in that case I decided to get those two knocked out relatively quickly, as EA Hockey was really just a reskin of NHL Hockey without the NHL logos or teams. This week's video, however, is not just a reskin, although in some places it may seem like it. No, RBI Baseball 4 for the Genesis is an actual sequel to RBI Baseball 3, the first Genesis version of the series that got its start on the NES. And while RBI Baseball 3 was released for both the NES and the Genesis, as you can tell by their visual similarity, RBI Baseball 4 is a console exclusive for the Genesis, and the franchise would remain exclusive to the Sega platform for the next 3 years until development forked with the release of Super RBI Baseball for the Super NES, and the quite different RBI Baseball 95 for 32X, which would be the last releases in the series until it was resurrected in 2014 for modern consoles. One other note about RBI Baseball 4 is that, like many other Tengen releases, it was not released in PAL regions, but did show up in Asia. I doubt that a PAL release would have sold well anyway, since not many people outside of Japan and North America care about baseball, so no big loss for Tengen, and this certainly wasn't the game for them to attempt to establish themselves. Growing up, I was definitely more of a fan of baseball than I am today, and that extends to video games. I can't even recall the last time I watched a baseball game all the way through on television, although I did attend a Cubs-Marlins game in person back in May of 2019. To say that I don't keep up with the day-to-day season events of even my favorite team is an understatement. But going back and playing these games from when I was younger is very interesting because I do still have that connection with the teams back then, and those rosters and players from whether I was watching games or highlights, or perhaps collecting worthless trading cards with their names on them. However, it's going to take a lot more than a sense of nostalgia for the early 90s era Major League Baseball for me to give RBI Baseball a good rating. Let's see what kind of rating RBI Baseball 4 can earn on its own merits, but first, a look at the package. And this is RBI Baseball 4. This particular copy is in decent shape, but not perfect. The outer cover is held up well, with just a few surface scratches here and there, and the hang tab is fully intact at the top of the case. There's a minor tear at the top of the binding, but thankfully it's small. The inner cover is in equally decent shape, with no sun or water damage, minus one odd thing. If you look at the bottom, you'll see that it's worn all the way around. This happens sometimes when the case is opened all the way and the inner cover slides around a little bit, and usually I'll just move them back into place, but this is a little different. It appears that the factory made a boo-boo on this run, or perhaps all of them, and the inner cover is actually about a 1/16 of an inch too long, or about 1.5 millimeters. So no matter how you center it in the sleeve, it either comes out on the top or the bottom. As far as this front cover goes, this is a doozy. Just look how cluttered this is. So the logo at the top is actually pretty nice and looks cool and original. However, that logo is probably the best thing about the cover, as it's all downhill from there.
Next is the nondescript generic batter taking a swing, which is okay, and I like how they used the faded perspective to also include a shot of the stadium in the background. And if they'd left the cover just like this, similar to the Japanese cover, I think it would have been a vast improvement. But no, now we also have the Sega seal, the Tengen crossbar logo, the Genesis logo tucked in by the spine behind the crossbar, the MLBPA logo, and a baseball letting you know that it's 8 megabits, doubling RBI Baseball 3's 4 megabits, and finally a bunch of flavor text jammed in between the player and the edge of the cover. This cover is a graphic design nightmare, and whoever signed off on this mess hopefully wasn't responsible for any others. Remember kids, less is more. Flipping over to the back, and at least the rear cover doesn't give you a migraine looking at it. There's lots of information here, but thankfully it's all nicely organized. Previous to this, Tengen had tended to use a similar format on the rear covers, but with 2 screenshots at the top, flavor text in the middle, and then 2 screenshots at the bottom. But as you can see here, they reorganized things, allowing for an extra screenshot and text that's designed to go with each of the pictures. The pictures included are all pretty decent and do a good job of showing different elements of the game, so we don't end up with 5 different shots of the pitcher-batter interface. Although I've got to call into question the text on one of these, specifically this one here. All new graphics and animation so awesome you'll feel like you're at the ballpark. Well, that statement's half true anyway. More on that in a bit. Opening up the box, and the manual and cartridge are in pretty great condition. My guess is the manual didn't get a ton of use. And along with those, we've got the nice bonus of an RBI Baseball 4 poster. Or is it? Unfolding it, it's a nice looking product guide for Tengen and Domark titles. And hey, there's a Rampart and Pit Fighter that we looked at previously. A few things of note here. First, this game's Space Hero. What is it? I have no idea, and when I went looking for information about it online, I found nothing, so I'm guessing it was canceled early on. But Sega Retro didn't even have a cancel listing for it. Then, one that hurts me in particular is Road Riot 4-Wheel Drive. This was one of my favorite arcade games at the time, so when it got canceled, I was really disappointed. But knowing the limitations of the Genesis, that might have been for the best. Flipping over the back of the poster, and hey, it's not an RBI Baseball 4 poster, but instead a much cooler poster for Dragon's Fury. I kind of want to frame this. I hadn't looked at the manual yet, so let's open that up real quick. On first look, it's pretty thick, but that's because the second half of the manual is all stats for the various teams, which is a nice bit of reference. As far as the first half of the manual goes, it's actually really good. It fully explains all elements of the game, the different modes, and has some screenshots and diagrams tossed in as well. It almost makes me want to forgive that disaster of a front cover. Almost. Okay, that's the package. Let's get into the game and see what's changed in this installment of the series. The first sports sequel review on Zilog and Moto. One of the things with games in the same series, especially with sports games, is what is the new game in the series bringing to the table that the last game didn't have? And why should you buy a new baseball, soccer, basketball, etc. game when you already have one? And some of these comparisons I'll make later on in the review, but first I'm going to focus on some of the basics, where the games are clearly different. The first thing I'll point out is just a basic physical difference. As I mentioned when talking about the front cover, RBI Baseball 4 doubles the amount of storage in the cartridge from RBI Baseball 3's paltry 4 megabits to RBI Baseball 4's 8 megabits. Which was much more in line with 1992 releases. Also, while RBI Baseball 3 debuted in the dead of summer in July of 1991, RBI Baseball 4 didn't come out until it was almost time for the Major League Baseball postseason in September of 1992. This allowed Tengen a full 14 months to ready the game, but at what cost? Sports games these days usually come out slightly before the sports season that's being reflected in the game, giving players a chance to play along with the season as it plays out in real life. So for RBI Baseball 4 to come out so late in the 1992 season seems like a swing and a miss. And no, I'm not sorry for that one. RBI Baseball 3 was a relatively simple game, and that shouldn't come as any surprise due to the fact that it was a port of the NES game. RBI Baseball 3's big selling point was that due to its incorporation of the MLBPA license, the game featured real player names and statistics from the 1990 season, so you ended up with accurate rosters on each of the MLB teams, although any particular team names were not included, just the cities, to help identify who was on what team. While it was a bit lame to play with nameless teams, at least having the actual players with their statistics allowed you to use your imagination and fill in the gaps. Along with the teams for the 1990 season, minus the team names and logos, the game also featured 28 division champion teams from 1983 to 1989, doubling the amount of teams to play with, and allowing you to do things like see what would happen if the 1989 Chicago Cubs would take on the 1984 version, or other fantastic matchups like that. The game didn't feature a season mode, specifically, but if you wanted, you could take on each team in your division, one game at a time, and if you beat every team, you would then get the opportunity to take on an all-star team. And this progress was all determined by a password-based save game system. So what about RBI Baseball 4, you ask? Well, at least as far as features are concerned, I can definitely say that RBI Baseball 4 brings a lot more to the table than RBI Baseball 3. Just like with RBI Baseball 3, all 26 teams are included for their 1991 seasons, but again, the lack of an MLB license prevents the use of actual team names and logos, with just the player names present. However, there's been one very important change to the game, and that's the addition of custom stadiums to the game. Every team now plays their home games in representations of their real-life stadiums, or at least what their real-life stadiums were like at the time of the 1991 season. There's no official names or anything like that, due to, again, the missing official MLB license, but Chicago has the ivy on the outfield fences, Boston has the Green Monster, Kansas City has the fountains, etc. And not all baseball stadiums are quite so unique, feature-wise, to give them a different look, but the dimensions of all the fields are accurate, which is huge. One of the things that makes baseball special is the wide variations between the different fields, so you end up with things like the old Yankee Stadium having a very short distance to the right field fence, which goes a long way towards making the game feel that much more authentic, even without certain official licenses. Beyond updating the teams to adding 4 more division champion teams for the 1990 season, and also the 1990 All-Star teams, the main game modes of one-off games, a 7-series game against one team, or league play of taking on all teams in your division hasn't changed. But Tengen did add the option now to play every team as well, getting one step closer to having a true season option. I like this addition a lot, but unfortunately the game still runs off of a password save system rather than using battery backup. I know adding a battery to the game would have made it more expensive, but no one likes having to write down passwords, even the relatively simple ones used in RBI Baseball 4. Also, you find the strangest things when researching these games. Apparently someone at Tengen was a Christian, and they added in Bible verses to the game that would be displayed when certain passwords were entered. It's not worth playing the game to see, but it's definitely one of the more odd Easter eggs I've seen included in any game, much less a sports title. Along with expanded tournament play and additional teams, Tengen added 2 new game modes to the game, and these are both pretty interesting additions. The first is a home run derby mode. Normally, home run derby modes in baseball games is a good thing for two reasons. First, it allows you to get swing practice in to practice your timing and learn when is the best time to swing. And then secondly, trying to see who can hit the most home runs is usually pretty fun. However, Tengen somehow managed to screw up both of those things somehow. The first problem is related to the fact that you hit off of a pitching machine instead of an actual pitcher. And because of that, the ball doesn't come out like it normally does, which defeats the purpose of trying to learn the timing. Which is unfortunate because they did allow you to decide whether you wanted to hit balls thrown at 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100 miles per hour. The second problem is that somehow, even though you're swinging at balls thrown right over the middle of the plate, it's still incredibly difficult to hit a home run. I tried 5 times with 5 different All-Stars in the recording of the game footage for this video, and I didn't hit a single home run. However, when playing a regular game against a computer in medium difficulty, I hit plenty of home runs, usually hitting about 5 per game. I don't understand how it's possible to be easier to hit a home run in a regular game than in Home Run Derby mode, but here we are. As broken as Home Run Derby mode is, the other new game mode, Game Breakers, is a breath of fresh air. Game Breakers mode allows you to pick your team and an opposing team, and then one of 17 different scenarios to play out against a computer. These scenarios will start at a certain point in the game, say the top of the 9th inning, and you, or the computer, might have runners on base, or a certain number of outs, and the goal is to play that scenario from that point in time forward to eventually win the game. I think these are a lot of fun and break up the monotony of playing regular 9-inning games. The goal is to win all 17 of the scenarios against the computer, and the password save system is used here as well, so you're not expected to win all of these in a row, even though some of them can be relatively short. As far as how RBI Baseball 4 plays, it's more or less the same as RBI Baseball 3. Your pitcher-batter interface is batter-centric, looking from above and behind the batter, and allowing you to watch the pitches come into the catcher. RBI Baseball 4 is certainly not the only baseball game to use a similar interface, but it works well for pitching and batting. When balls are hit to the field, most of the time the computer will move to the ball to make the catch or field the ball automatically, but sometimes the player will stop moving just short of making the play, with the computer expecting you to take over movement and complete the play. This is incredibly frustrating, especially on hard-hit balls, and it really would make more sense for the computer to either do nothing or finish making the play, minus throwing the ball, because this weird limbo is a bad place to be in, especially in a close game where 1 or 2 misfielded balls can be the difference between a win or a loss. On a positive note, however, when it comes to fielding, the defensive players on the screen are much larger than they were previously, allowing the game to be easier when it comes to making pop flies, as you don't have to worry about being just slightly not aligned and allowing the ball to drop in. From a graphics perspective, RBI Baseball 4 is definitely overhauled from RBI Baseball 3, and it's not just the new stadium presentations, although that certainly helps. One of my main complaints about RBI Baseball 3 was that, especially for the batter-pitcher interface, it really looked like the game had been almost directly brought over from the NES version. Well, they definitely changed the batter-pitcher interface around, and in place of the older, jerkier animations are much smoother, seemingly rotoscoped animations for both batting and pitching. The only problem is, in their effort to add lots of frames of animation to the game, details from those frames have been lost, like say, the faces on the pitchers. The overall effect is very strange, and I'm not sure it's a change for the better. I'd almost rather have the RBI Baseball 3 presentation back in this regard. Any displays in the field are much better, however, with the much larger characters on screen and better looking audiences in the stands, so at least they got that part correct. The audio in the game, on the other hand, is not improved from RBI Baseball 3. The game appears to reuse not only the sound effects and speech from the previous game, but also organ themes / background music to RBI Baseball 3 have been moved to RBI Baseball 4. So if you didn't care for the music in RBI Baseball 3, be prepared to turn this off right away. This is lazy, plain and simple, and I'd give it a pass if the music or sound effects in RBI Baseball 3 were above average, but they're not, to the point of when the announcer calls the position to catch a pop fly, anytime the announcer is supposed to say catcher, I swear it says Edgar. If you do choose to play RBI Baseball 4, you'd be forgiven for muting the game and supplying your own audio. All in all, I really wanted to give RBI Baseball 4 3 stars, as it's definitely an improvement over its predecessor, which was a 2-star game. And there weren't a ton of baseball games at that point in the Genesis library. But the bizarre faceless pitchers, the broken home run derby mode, and the issues with fielding still not being quite right, combined with a weak audio subsystem and still relying on password saves, have me handing out another 2-star rating. But if you're the type to give half stars, go ahead and bump it up to 2.5, as the new Game Breaker mode and the real-life based stadiums do deserve some recognition. Hopefully RBI Baseball 93 will fix some of these issues and earn that 3rd star, as Tengen was close here, but no cigar.
And that was RBI Baseball 4 for the Genesis. While I really like the fact that Tengen saw fit to add a lot of features to the game, and really try to make the game worth purchasing besides just adding current rosters to the game, the underlying game didn't really change that much. And to a point, that's okay, because the really simple style of the early RBI Baseball type games worked pretty well. But I can't just help wanting more out of the game. Perhaps in the next release in the series, RBI Baseball 93, we'll get things over the hump. We'll find out in another 100 episodes or so. Next week on Zilog and Moto, I'm actually doing a timely video, sort of. I like being able to tie these games to the real-world things that are occurring, even 30 to 35 years later. So, when I saw this game on the shelf, it was like a light bulb had gone off, probably similar to what would have happened in one of the cartoons the game is based on. And I knew that this was definitely the game to review for next week. I'll give you a hint. In 1992, a movie with almost the same title as one that was released this past week came out in theaters, and a Master System game with the same name was produced and released as a European exclusive. And I'll have that review for you next week. From the screenshots I've seen, I've got to say, it looks pretty good. Please remember to subscribe if you've liked this video, and remember, whatever you like to play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.